Welcome back to the channel The Coin Empire. Today we are diving into one of the most shocking and mind-blowing stories in modern coin collecting, a story that has collectors checking their change jars, bank rolls, and old piggy banks with fresh excitement. Because we are talking about the legendary 1994 quarter dollar that some believe could be worth up to $120 million due to extraordinary errors and rare minting mistakes that transformed an ordinary 25-cent coin into a potential life-changing treasure. And before you think this sounds impossible, remember that the world of coin collecting has repeatedly proven that tiny differences, microscopic flaws, and rare production accidents at the United States Mint can turn everyday pocket change into headline-making rarities. So let's break down exactly why a 1994 quarter struck at the Philadelphia Mint with the P Mint mark could reach such an unbelievable valuation when the standard version is only worth face value. And it all starts with understanding how the quarter is made at the United States Mint, where blank planchets are fed into high-speed presses and struck by hardened steel dies bearing the image of George Washington on the obverse and the heraldic eagle design on the reverse used from 1932 until the state quarters began in 1999. And in 1994 millions upon millions of quarters were produced in Philadelphia, most of them completely normal, composed of a copper core sandwiched between outer layers of copper nickel-clad, weighing approximately 5.67 grams and measuring 24.26 millimeters in diameter. But when something goes wrong during that process, the results can be spectacular, and the most valuable possibilities begin with the concept of a wrong planchet error. Imagine a 1994 quarter accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, such as a dime planchet, or even a foreign coin blank, creating a smaller or differently colored quarter with mismatched weight and diameter. Such an error would immediately stand out to experienced collectors, and if authenticated by major grading services like PCGS or NGC, it could command astronomical prices, especially if it were unique. And then there is the off-metal strike scenario, where instead of the standard copper nickel-clad composition, the coin is mistakenly struck on a silver planchet leftover from special mint production, producing a 1994 quarter with a bright silver sheen and a slightly different weight, around 6.25 grams if struck on a 90% silver blank. And while silver quarters officially ended in 1964, transitional errors and leftover planchets have historically created rarities that sell for staggering sums. And if a verified 1994 quarter were discovered struck on a silver planchet never meant for circulation, it would ignite a frenzy in the numismatic community. But that is only the beginning, because double die errors are another powerful driver of value, occurring when the die itself receives a misaligned impression during hubbing, causing noticeable doubling in the lettering, such as Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, or the date 1994. And while minor doubling is common and worth small premiums, a dramatic double die obverse with strong separation visible to the naked eye could elevate a coin's desirability immensely, especially if it is the finest known example in mint state condition. And condition is everything, because a coin graded MS-68 or MS-69 by a respected grading service can multiply in value compared to lower grades. So if a 1994 quarter with a dramatic double die also survived in pristine uncirculated condition, free of contact marks and with blazing luster, it would become the crown jewel of modern Washington quarters, and collectors compete fiercely for top pop coins, meaning the highest graded examples known, pushing prices into 6 or even 7 figures under the right circumstances. And then we must consider the possibility of a meal error, one of the rarest and most exciting mint mistakes, where the obverse of one coin is paired with the reverse of another. Imagine a 1994 Washington quarter obverse mistakenly paired with a reverse design intended for a different denomination, or even an experimental design. Mule errors have sold for hundreds of thousands and even millions in other series. So if such a pairing were discovered dated 1994 with the P Mint mark, it could easily become a once-in-a-generation treasure, and the story becomes even more dramatic when we talk about major die breaks and cuds, which occur when a portion of the die actually cracks and breaks away, leaving a raised blob of metal on the coin's surface. While many cuds are minor, a massive retained cud covering a large portion of the design can make a coin visually stunning and highly collectible. And if a unique dramatic die break were discovered on a 1994 P quarter in flawless condition, media attention alone could drive speculative value through the roof. And speaking of dramatic visuals, broad strikes and partial collar errors also add intrigue. A broad-struck 1994 P quarter would appear wider and thinner than normal because it was struck without the retaining collar, giving it a strange oversized look, and while broad strikes are known, combining that with another rare feature such as a double die or wrong planchet would create a compound error. And compound errors are especially prized because the odds of multiple mistakes occurring on a single coin are astronomically low, and rarity combined with demand is the ultimate formula for extreme valuations. And then there is the realm of experimental compositions. During the 1990s, the Mint occasionally tested alternative alloys and processes, and if a 1994 P quarter were accidentally released struck on a test alloy not intended for circulation, confirmed through metallurgical analysis, that coin would not just be a curiosity but a historical artifact representing a hidden chapter of Mint experimentation, and collectors of modern rarities are willing to pay incredible sums for unique pieces that tell a story of secrecy and accident. And another angle that fuels the $120 million narrative is the concept of a one-of-a-kind specimen, because a numismatic's uniqueness can eclipse even precious metal content. If there is only one known example of a spectacular 1994 P quarter error, and it is certified, authenticated, and widely publicized, elite collectors and investors with deep pockets could battle in auction rooms, driving the hammer price beyond all expectations, similar to how other legendary coins have shattered records when two determined bidders refuse to back down. And hype plays a powerful role as well. As social media and YouTube channels like the Coin Empire spread awareness, more people search their change, increasing the mystique and lore surrounding a specific date and mint mark. And when a coin becomes famous, it transcends its metal and becomes a cultural icon within the hobby. And we cannot ignore the importance of provenance. If a 1994 P quarter with a massive error were discovered in an original mint sealed bag or traced back to a known mint employee or a documented hoard, that documented history would add credibility and value. And auction houses thrive on storytelling because collectors are not just buying metal, they are buying history, drama, and exclusivity. And imagine the headlines if a previously unknown 1994 P quarter with a triple struck off center error combined with a wrong metal composition surfaced and experts declared it unique. The bidding war would be intense, and although $120 million would make it the most valuable modern circulating coin ever imagined, the psychology of scarcity and the competitive nature of ultra-wealthy collectors could theoretically justify such a price under extraordinary circumstances. And even subtle errors like missing clad layers where the outer copper-nickel coating is absent exposing the copper core can create striking two-tone appearances that captivate collectors, especially if the coin is uncirculated and the error is dramatic and evenly distributed. And we also consider rotated dies, where the reverse design is misaligned relative to the obverse, creating a noticeable twist when the coin is flipped vertically. And while small rotations are minor, extreme rotations approaching 90 or 180 degrees are far rarer and more desirable, and stacking multiple errors like rotation plus double die plus off-center strike would create the kind of rarity that collectors dream about. And beyond physical errors there is the grading factor, because modern quarters are often saved in mint rolls and bags, meaning thousands exist in high grade, but only a tiny fraction achieve the absolute pinnacle grades like MS69 or the elusive MS70. And registry set collectors compete for the finest graded examples of each date and mint mark. So if a 1994 P quarter were discovered as the single finest known with extraordinary eye appeal and booming luster, it could command extraordinary premiums. And if that same coin also carried a spectacular error, the sky becomes the limit. And let's not forget about struck-through errors, where foreign materials such as grease, cloth, or metal shavings interfered with the strike, leaving ghostly impressions or missing details. A dramatic struck-through cloth pattern across George Washington's portrait would be visually unforgettable, and uniqueness drives excitement, and excitement drives value, and over time legends grow, and the idea of a 1994 P quarter worth $120 million captures imaginations because it combines the thrill of treasure hunting with the accessibility of pocket change. Next, 1981p quarter dollar coin. Today we are uncovering one of the most unbelievable and fascinating stories in modern coin collecting, a story that sounds almost impossible but captures the imagination of collectors all around the world, because we are talking about the legendary 1981p quarter dollar that some believe could be worth as much as $115 million due to extraordinary mint errors, rare production mistakes, and once-in-a-lifetime circumstances that transformed an ordinary 25-cent coin into a potential record-breaking treasure. And before you dismiss the idea as fantasy, remember that the world of numismatics has repeatedly proven that tiny variations, microscopic flaws, and rare minting accidents at the United States Mint can turn everyday pocket change into coins worth fortunes. And when we look at the 1981p Washington quarter struck at the Philadelphia Mint, we are looking at a coin that was produced in large numbers for circulation, featuring the classic portrait of George Washington on the obverse and the traditional eagle reverse design that was used for decades before the state quarters era began, composed of a copper core with outer layers of copper nickel clad, weighing approximately 5.67 grams and measuring 24.26 millimeters in diameter. Yet within those millions of coins lies the possibility that one single dramatic mistake during production created an ultra-rare specimen unlike any other, and the first path towards such extraordinary value begins with the concept of a wrong planchet error, which occurs when a blank intended for a different denomination is accidentally fed into the quarter press, meaning a 1981p quarter design could be struck onto a dime planchet, a nickel planchet, or even a foreign coin blank, resulting in a coin that is smaller, lighter, or composed of a completely different metal than expected. And when such an error escapes the mint and enters circulation, its rarity can be astonishing because the odds of that precise mismatch happening and surviving quality control are extremely low, and if that coin were authenticated and confirmed by top grading services, collectors would recognize its uniqueness immediately, driving demand to incredible heights. And then we consider the possibility of an off-metal strike involving silver. Because although regular circulating quarters had not been struck in 90% silver since 1964, the mint still handled silver planchets for special proof sets and commemoratives. And if by some extraordinary accident a silver planchet were mixed into the regular production line and struck with 1981p quarter dies, the resulting coin would have a different weight around 6.25 grams and a bright silver appearance with no visible copper edge. And such a transitional or off-metal error would be a headline-making discovery capable of attracting global attention from collectors and investors alike. And when rarity combines with condition, the numbers can escalate dramatically. Because a coin graded in pristine mint state condition such as MS68 or higher becomes exponentially rarer than lower grade examples, especially in modern issues where bag marks and contact damage are common. So if the hypothetical 1981p silver era quarter also survived in nearly flawless condition with blazing mint luster and sharp strike details, it could become the centerpiece of elite collections. And beyond composition errors, we enter the realm of doubled dies, one of the most exciting categories of mint mistakes, which occur when the die used to strike coins receives multiple impressions from the hub at slightly different angles, causing visible doubling in the lettering or design elements. And while minor machine doubling is common and carries modest premiums, a true doubled die obverse with strong separation in Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, or the date 1981 would be immediately recognizable and highly sought after, and if the doubling were dramatic enough to be seen without magnification, collectors would classify it as a major variety, and major doubled dies in other series have commanded enormous sums, especially when they are rare and in high grade, and the possibility of a one-of-a-kind 1981p doubled die quarter existing undetected for decades fuels the imagination of treasure hunters everywhere. And then we must discuss meal errors, which are among the rarest and most valuable mint mistakes known, occurring when the obverse of one coin is paired with the reverse of another denomination or design entirely, creating a mismatched hybrid that was never intended to exist. And while meal errors are exceptionally rare, history has shown that they can slip through in extraordinary circumstances. And if a 1981p Washington quarter obverse were accidentally paired with a reverse die from another coin such as a different denomination or a pattern design, that coin would instantly become legendary, and uniqueness in numismatics often outweighs even precious metal content, meaning that a single known mule could ignite a bidding war between wealthy collectors determined to own a piece of minting history, potentially pushing the price into the realm of tens of millions or more under extraordinary circumstances. And beyond mules, we have broad strikes, off-center strikes, and partial collar errors that dramatically alter the appearance of a coin. A broad-struck 1981 P-quarter would appear wider and thinner than normal because it was struck without the retaining collar, and if that broad strike were combined with an off-center strike leaving part of the design missing while still showing the full date and mint mark, collectors would consider it a spectacular visual error, and compound errors where multiple mistakes occur on the same coin are particularly prized because the statistical probability of several independent failures aligning on one piece is extremely small. And such coins often become the stars of major auctions. And then there are clipped planchet errors where a curved section of the blank is missing due to improper punching from the metal strip, creating a distinctive crescent shape along the rim. And while clipped planchets exist in many years, a dramatic and unusually large clip on a 1981 P-quarter in flawless mint state condition could draw significant attention, especially if it also exhibited other anomalies. And die cracks and cuds add another layer of intrigue, as dies can develop fractures over time, leaving raised lines or blobs of metal on the struck coins, and while minor cracks are common, a massive retained cud covering a significant portion of the design can make a coin visually striking and highly collectible, and if a unique 1981 P-quarter displayed an enormous die break unlike any other recorded, its singular status could contribute to astronomical valuation. And we cannot overlook the possibility of experimental compositions, because the early 1980s were a time of economic pressure and rising metal costs, leading the mint to explore alternative alloys and production techniques. And if an experimental alloy planchet were mistakenly released into circulation bearing the 1981 P-quarter design, metallurgical testing could reveal its unusual makeup, instantly elevating it to the status of a historic anomaly. And collectors prize coins that represent secret or transitional moments in mint history, and provenance plays a crucial role as well, because if such a coin were discovered in an original sealed mint bag or traced back to a documented source within the mint, its authenticity and story would strengthen its appeal, and auction houses thrive on compelling narratives. And when rarity, condition, authentication, and storytelling converge, prices can defy conventional expectations, and registry-set competition further intensifies demand. As collectors striving to build the highest graded sets of Washington quarters compete fiercely for top population coins, meaning that even without dramatic errors, a single finest known MS-69 or MS-70 example of a rare variety can command staggering premiums, and if that finest known coin also carried a spectacular mint error, it would become virtually priceless in the eyes of determined buyers, and struck through errors add even more possibilities, occurring when grease, cloth, or metal debris interferes with the strike, leaving ghostly impressions or missing details that create unique textures and patterns across the coin's surface. And a dramatic struck-through cloth pattern across Washington's portrait on a 1981 P-quarter would be unlike anything else in the series, captivating collectors who value one-of-a-kind appearances. And rotated die errors where the reverse is misaligned relative to the obverse can also generate excitement, especially when the rotation is extreme such as 90 or 180 degrees, creating a startling effect when the coin is flipped vertically, and combining rotation with other major errors would produce a compound rarity that could dominate headlines in the numismatic community, and over time legends grow around such coins, as stories spread through coin shows, online forums, and channels like the Coin Empire, inspiring collectors to examine their change more closely. And while the vast majority of 1981 P-quarters remain worth only face value, the dream that one extraordinary specimen with multiple dramatic errors might exist keeps the hunt alive. And in a hobby driven by scarcity, competition, and passion, even a single discovery can reshape the market overnight, and the idea of a 1981 P-quarter valued at $115 million symbolizes the ultimate treasure hunt, reminding us that sometimes the smallest objects carry the greatest potential. Next, 1983 P-quarter dollar coin. Today we are diving into one of the most thrilling and unbelievable stories in modern coin collecting, A story that proves once again that even the most ordinary-looking pocket change can hide an extraordinary secret. Because we are talking about the legendary 1983 quarter dollar that some collectors believe could be worth as much as $110 million due to rare mint errors, dramatic production mistakes, and once-in-a-lifetime combinations of factors that transformed a simple 25-cent coin into a potential record-breaking treasure. And if that sounds impossible, just remember that the world of numismatics is built on rarity, condition, demand, and history. And when those four elements collide in a perfect storm, values can reach levels that shock the general public. So let us carefully explore why a 1983 Washington quarter struck at the Philadelphia Mint could, under extraordinary circumstances, command such an astonishing price. Starting with the fact that 1983 was already an unusual year for coin collectors because mint sets were not officially issued by the United States Mint for 1982 and 1983, which means that high-grade uncirculated examples of coins from those years are significantly scarcer than surrounding dates, and that alone creates an important foundation for potential value, because when fewer pristine coins are saved at the time of issue, the surviving population in top grades decades later becomes dramatically limited. And now imagine combining that natural scarcity with a major mint error, and suddenly the stage is set for something historic. Because the 1983 quarter normally features the familiar portrait of George Washington on the obverse and the classic eagle reverse design used before the state quarters era began in 1999, struck in copper nickel-clad composition with a copper core and outer layers of copper nickel, weighing approximately 5.67 grams and measuring 24.26 millimeters in diameter, but within the high-speed minting presses of Philadelphia, mistakes can and do happen, and one of the most valuable possibilities is a wrong planchet error, which occurs when a blank intended for a different denomination is accidentally fed into the quarter press, meaning a 1983 quarter design could be struck onto a dime planchet, resulting in a smaller coin with incomplete design details around the edges. Or even onto a nickel planchet, creating a thicker and heavier piece with unusual coloration, and such mismatched coins immediately attract attention because their size, weight, and appearance differ from normal expectations, and if a 1983 quarter were discovered struck on an off-metal planchet such as a silver blank left over from special production, its weight would differ and its edge would lack the visible copper stripe, and that alone would cause a sensation in the collecting world. Because transitional and off-metal errors represent direct evidence of minting accidents that were never meant to leave the facility, and rarity of that magnitude drives competitive bidding among serious collectors. And then we enter the realm of double die errors, one of the most celebrated categories in numismatics, created when the die itself receives multiple impressions from the hub at slightly different alignments, causing strong visible doubling in the lettering or design elements. And while minor machine doubling is common and relatively modest in value, a true doubled die obverse on a 1983 quarter with dramatic separation in Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, or the date 1983 would be a completely different story, especially if the doubling is bold enough to be seen without magnification, because collectors prize major varieties that are easily recognizable, and if only a handful were known in high grade due to the lack of official mint sets during that year. The competition for the finest example could escalate rapidly, and condition plays a massive role here because a coin graded MS-67 or MS-68 from 1983 is already scarce, and if a dramatic double die example were graded at the very top of the population reports by leading grading services, registry set collectors striving to assemble the highest graded Washington quarter collections would likely battle intensely for ownership. And registry competition has repeatedly driven modern coins to prices far beyond expectations, and beyond doubled dies we must consider mule errors, which occur when the obverse of one coin is mistakenly paired with the reverse die of another denomination or design, creating a hybrid never intended by the mint. And although mule errors are exceptionally rare, history has shown they can escape into circulation, and if a 1983 Washington quarter obverse were accidentally struck with a reverse die from a different coin or even an experimental design, that single coin would instantly become one of the most important modern mint errors ever discovered, and uniqueness is often the ultimate driver of extreme valuations, Because if only one example exists and it is authenticated, wealthy collectors who specialize in mint errors could compete in an auction setting where pride and prestige matter just as much as money, and such a scenario could push bidding into 8 or even 9-figure territory under extraordinary circumstances. And then we have broad strikes and off-center strikes, which occur when the coin is struck outside the retaining collar or not properly centered between the dies, producing coins that appear wider, thinner, or partially blank on one side. And while minor off-center strikes are relatively common, a dramatic off-center 1983 P-quarter showing perhaps 50% of the design with a full visible date and mint mark would be visually spectacular, and if that coin also happened to be struck on the wrong metal or display a doubled die, it would become a compound error, and compound errors are especially prized because the probability of multiple independent mistakes occurring on the same coin is incredibly low, and such rarity fuels demand, and clipped planchet errors add another dimension, occurring when the blank was improperly punched from the metal strip, leaving a curved or straight missing portion along the rim. And while many clipped planchets exist, a large dramatic clip on a high-grade 1983 P-quarter would be a standout piece. And die cracks and cuds also contribute to uniqueness, as dies can fracture over time, leaving raised lines or massive blobs of metal on the coin's surface, and a major retained cud covering a large section of the design could create a striking and one-of-a-kind appearance that collectors find irresistible. And because 1,983 quarters in top uncirculated condition are already scarce due to heavy circulation at the time and absence of mint sets, discovering a spectacular error in pristine state would be even more extraordinary. And we must also discuss experimental compositions, because during periods of economic pressure the Mint has historically explored alternative alloys to reduce costs, and if an experimental alloyed blank were accidentally released bearing the 1983 P-quarter design, metallurgical testing could reveal its unusual composition, turning it into not just an error coin but a historic artifact documenting an unpublicized phase of Mint experimentation. And provenance would further amplify value, because if such a coin were traced back to an original Mint sealed bag, a bank hoard, or a documented source connected to the Mint, its story would captivate auction audiences, and storytelling plays a powerful role in numismatics, as collectors are not merely buying metal but acquiring tangible pieces of history, and when rarity, condition, authentication, and narrative align, price ceilings can shatter. And the idea of a 1983 P-quarter valued at $110 million symbolizes the ultimate dream of coin collecting, the possibility that an everyday coin hiding in plain sight could represent generational wealth, and even subtle errors like missing clad layers exposing the copper core, extreme die rotations approaching 180 degrees, or dramatic struck through cloth patterns leaving ghostly impressions across Washington's portrait can elevate a coin from ordinary to extraordinary, especially if combined in a single specimen, and as awareness spreads through coin shows, online communities, and channels like the Coin Empire, more collectors examine their change carefully, increasing the excitement and legend surrounding specific dates. And although the vast majority of 1983 P-quarters remain worth only face value, the small chance that one spectacular, authenticated, and uniquely flawed example exists keeps the hunt alive, and that relentless search for rarity is what drives the hobby forward, reminding us that sometimes the most valuable treasures are not locked in vaults, but waiting quietly in circulation, ready to astonish the world when finally discovered. Last 1978 $quarter coin. Today we are stepping into another unbelievable story from the world of coin collecting, a story that sounds almost too incredible to be true yet captures the imagination of collectors and treasure hunters everywhere. Because we are talking about the legendary 1978 $quarter that some believe could be worth an astonishing $104 million due to rare mint errors, shocking production mistakes, and extraordinary circumstances that turned an everyday 25-cent coin into a potential once-in-a-lifetime fortune. And before anyone dismisses this as impossible, it is important to understand how the coin market truly works, because value in numismatics is driven not by face value but by rarity, condition, demand, uniqueness, and historical importance, and when all of those elements collide in a single coin the result can be explosive. So let us break down why a 1978 Washington quarter, struck during the final decades of the classic Eagle reverse era before the state quarter program transformed the series, could under extraordinary conditions reach a valuation that shocks the world, beginning with the basics of how these coins were made at the United States Mint, where millions of copper nickel-clad planchets with a pure copper core sandwiched between outer layers of copper nickel were fed into high-speed presses. Each planchet weighing approximately 5.67 grams and measuring 24.26 millimeters in diameter, struck with the familiar portrait of George Washington on the obverse and the heraldic eagle with outstretched wings on the reverse, and in 1978 hundreds of millions of quarters were produced across mint facilities including Philadelphia and Denver, most of them completely ordinary and worth only face value. Yet within such enormous production numbers lies the possibility that a handful of dramatic minting mistakes slipped through quality control and entered circulation unnoticed, and those mistakes are where the story of extreme value begins, because one of the most powerful error categories is the wrong planchet strike, which occurs when a blank intended for a different denomination or even a foreign coin is mistakenly fed into the quarter press, resulting in a coin that may be smaller, larger, thinner, thicker, lighter, or composed of a different metal than standard. And imagine a 1978 quarter design struck on a dime planchet, producing a noticeably undersized coin with incomplete design details near the edges, or perhaps struck on a nickel planchet, creating a heavier coin with a different color and feel, or even more dramatically struck on a leftover 40% silver planchet from special mint production, creating a brilliant silver appearing quarter dated 1978 with no copper edge visible, and while silver circulation quarters officially ended in 1964. The mint continued to handle silver for special issues and foreign contracts, meaning that under extraordinary circumstances a silver blank could have been misfed into a clad press, and if such a coin were discovered and authenticated through precise weight measurement and metallurgical testing, its uniqueness would immediately attract worldwide attention, because off-metal errors represent undeniable proof of minting anomalies that were never meant to exist, and rarity at that level creates a feeding frenzy among elite collectors. And then there is the legendary double die error, one of the most celebrated and valuable types of mint mistakes, created when the die used to strike coins receives multiple impressions from the hub at slightly misaligned positions, causing strong visible doubling in the design elements such as Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, or the date 1978, and while minor machine doubling is common and often insignificant, a true double die with bold separation lines that can be seen without magnification is a completely different phenomenon. And if a dramatic double die obverse were discovered on a 1978 quarter with crisp detail and minimal wear, it would become a major variety in the Washington quarter series, and the value would climb even higher if the coin survived in exceptional mint state condition, because condition multiplies rarity exponentially, especially in modern clad coinage where bag marks and abrasions are common due to bulk handling in large mint bags. So if the hypothetical 1978 double die quarter were graded MS68 or higher by a leading grading service and identified as the finest known example, registry set collectors would likely compete aggressively for ownership, pushing prices into unimaginable territory, and the power of registry competition cannot be underestimated, as collectors seeking the highest graded sets of Washington quarters are willing to pay premiums far beyond conventional price guides. And beyond doubled dies we enter the realm of mule errors, which are among the rarest and most spectacular minting mistakes known, occurring when the obverse of one coin is accidentally paired with the reverse die of another denomination or an experimental design, creating a hybrid never authorized by the mint. And while mule errors are extremely rare, they have occurred in other series. And if a 1978 Washington quarter obverse were mistakenly struck with a reverse die from a different coin or a prototype design, that single coin would instantly become one of the most important modern mint errors in history, and if only one example were known, its uniqueness alone could justify staggering auction results, because a numismatic's uniqueness is often the ultimate value driver, and when two determined collectors with significant financial resources desire the same one-of-a-kind coin, bidding wars can escalate beyond rational limits. And then we must discuss broad strikes and off-center strikes, which occur when the coin is struck outside of its retaining collar or not properly centered between the dies, producing coins that appear wider and thinner than normal or partially blank on one side, and while minor off-center strikes are collected widely, a dramatic off-center 1978 quarter showing perhaps 50% of the design with the full date and mint mark visible would be a stunning visual error. And if that same coin also displayed a wrong planchet composition or strong doubling, it would become a compound error. And compound errors are especially prized because the statistical probability of multiple independent failures occurring on the same coin is extremely low, making such pieces exceptionally rare, and clipped planchet errors add another dimension to the possibilities, occurring when the blank was improperly punched from the metal strip, leaving a curved or straight missing section along the rim. And while clipped planchets exist for many dates, a large dramatic clip on a high-grade 1978 quarter with sharp detail and bright luster would stand out in any advanced collection. And die cracks and cuds also play a major role in unique appearances, as dies can fracture from stress after striking hundreds of thousands of coins, leaving raised lines or large blobs of metal on the struck coins, and a massive retained cud covering a significant portion of the design could create a one-of-a-kind appearance unlike any other 1978 quarter, and collectors often pay substantial premiums for visually dramatic die breaks, especially when combined with high-grade preservation. And another fascinating possibility involves experimental compositions. Because during the 1970s the United States Mint faced fluctuating metal prices and periodically researched alternative alloys and production methods, and if an experimental alloy planchet were mistakenly released bearing the 1978 quarter design, subsequent metallurgical analysis could reveal unusual metallic properties, instantly transforming the coin into both an error and a historical artifact representing a hidden chapter of mint experimentation, and provenance would further amplify value. Because if such a coin were traced back to an original sealed mint bag, a documented bank hoard, or a source connected directly to mint operations, its story would captivate collectors and investors alike, and storytelling plays a powerful role in driving prices at major auctions, as buyers are often motivated not only by rarity but by the narrative surrounding a coin's discovery and survival. And beyond dramatic errors we must also consider extreme condition rarity, because while millions of 1978 quarters were produced, very few survive in near-perfect condition decades later due to circulation wear and handling damage, and if a flawless MS-69 or even an elusive MS-70 example were discovered with extraordinary eye appeal, booming cartwheel luster, and razor-sharp strike details, registry set competition alone could push its value far beyond expectations, especially if population reports confirmed it as unique at the top grade. And when you combine extreme condition rarity with a major mint error, the potential valuation multiplies dramatically, and struck-through errors also add intrigue, occurring when foreign materials such as grease, cloth fibers, or metal shavings interfered with the strike, leaving ghostly patterns or missing details across the coin's surface, and a dramatic struck-through cloth pattern across Washington's portrait on a 1978 quarter would be visually unforgettable, particularly if preserved in mint state condition, and rotated die errors where the reverse is misaligned relative to the obverse can also generate excitement, especially when the rotation is extreme such as 90 or 180 degrees, creating a startling effect when the coin is flipped vertically, and stacking multiple anomalies such as rotation, doubling,